Like many of you, I'm proud to be an American, but most importantly, I'm proud to be a father and husband, which means it's my duty to protect my family no matter what circumstances are thrown my way, which is why I rely on my Patriot Supply. This month, their mega 3-month emergency food kit comes jam-packed with 33 varieties of filling and delicious foods. Not only does that include creamy chicken flavored rice, old-fashioned Italian spaghetti, and savory, cheesy broccoli soup, but you will also get a bonus protein kit with diced beef, flavorful chicken chunks, and 3 varieties of beans, plus 9 different fruits, vegetables, and snacks. All in all, this emergency food kit provides a whopping 2,500 calories per day and keeps you well fed and ready for anything. The way I see it, it's my solemn duty as an American and father and husband to protect my family without waiting for handouts. And that starts with food you can depend on that lasts up to 25 years. If you go to preparewitheddy.com right now, you can save up to $300 on your mega 3-month emergency food kit. It ships fast and free. Once again, that's preparewitheddy.com and save up to $300 on your mega emergency food kit supply. Thank you and God bless.
Welcome to Shoot Me Straight, Dave Fields. Today, Eddie Gallagher is out, and we have John Wargo and Matt Zimmermann.
Nailed it.
Everyone calls him Z, though, so that's what I've been calling him. And I didn't think I'd get that right, but I did. So these guys have a how would you describe a startup? Well, it's not a startup anymore. I mean, you guys.
Yeah, we're really moving beyond the startup phase now. We started as 7 dudes, and now we're over 230 people, and
wow,
just scaling out from there. Got a pretty big business with the DoD. We're looking at going SaaS this year.
Yeah.
Stretching out into the commercial realm from there. But yeah, so we're like in that weird phase of like, yeah, we're technically a startup, but we're also maybe more of a medium-sized business or moving towards that.
Yeah, when he says SaaS, for people that don't know, software as a service.
Yeah, like today, like if you came to us, like we have this platform where we can aggregate data and then have like really cool ways to visualize it. And a lot of that just works out of the box, and that's what makes us competitive. But if you came to us, you'd be like, wow, that's a awesome freaking demo that you had. Like, how do I get started? And we're like, well, we kind of have to like customize it for you, and you got to send us your data, and we'll put it in there and get you started. And if there's like updates, that probably needs to come through us as well. And that just like turns a lot of people off of like, well, we got smart people and we can kind of manage that environment and get our own data in there and just do it all of ourselves. So we're moving to where people can just go to our website, create an account, put their payment stuff in, and just get started.
Yeah, a true SaaS.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started with 7 dudes.
Yeah.
Tell me that backstory.
Yeah. So we all worked at another defense contractor, and it's like just like your typical workplace. You know, think just like cubicles and very focused on like P&L finance reports and managing expenses, and not like so much on the technology piece of it. And we just wanted to create a place that was like a Silicon Valley-ish, like sounds cliche, but just like a place where you could come and like hang out and focus on tech stuff and not have to worry about all the finance things and business stuff, and just attract really cool people to work with. And so yeah, we were all super young, and we were like, we can do this better. Totally, we'll just start our own business. You know, it's nonchalant, and starting a business is really hard. There's a lot of like details to it that we to this day are still figuring out bits and pieces of it. Every day is like a learning experience, but you know, we set off on our own, and I think a lot of our success has come from just like not knowing that you can't do something a certain way. Like you should do it like this is a textbook way of doing it. We're like, nah, we'll figure it out. We'll jump in and just iterate and go from there. But yeah, it was the 7 of us. Didn't even have an office to start. We just had laptops. It's all software engineering. So the cool thing with that is you can just download stuff off the internet and just get started. All your compilers, all your examples and stuff. Like there's really not too much of a startup cost with that. We had an initial contract working with the Navy. And we've really grown that out to working with the DoD at large now. But yeah, I remember getting like our first office, Wargo, like sitting outside. Everyone brought their own chairs because we couldn't afford chairs. We had a fold-out table. It was like a desk and a fold-out table that we put together, and that was like we all worked around that and just iterated from there. Really, yeah.
Those are good times. during that time of, I mean, you're working 20 hours a day and,
Yeah.
and like just trying to grow it. Next thing. Those 7 guys, Wargo was one of them.
Wargo was an intern. You were in high school at the time. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was going to say I was, I think, 16 when we started Beast Code, and that was just a crazy time. Because it was like, go to high school for however many hours a day that takes, and then drive from there to the office, and then work until like 8 or 9 p.m., put in as many hours as I can, try to set these guys up for success, and then like go to sleep and just do it all over again. So it's really funny because I talk with people who remember that time through rose-colored glasses, and I don't want to say that it was all bad. There was definitely a lot of good things, and it's definitely an exciting time. But on the flip side, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I miss the old Beast Code. And I'm like, why? Do you miss working 20 hours a day? Do you miss not knowing when the next contract was going to be? Like, there were times where like, well, this contract ends in 3 months, and what comes after that? And the answer was, I don't know, get better. Like, so that was definitely a very challenging time. I remember driving home with Sean Shelton, one of the other founders, and it was just like silence for the first half of the car ride because we were just mentally zapped. And then like he breaks the silence by going, how much longer do you think we can do this? Like, how much longer can we do this by ourselves with no help? Like, if we haven't hired someone in 6 months, do we call it? Because we're going to kill ourselves if we do this for like 10 years. And so it was an incredible challenge. And I always remind people that like, as much as it sucks and as much as it's cool, like that's part of what shaped us into who we are, because we're defined by the challenges that we overcome. And that's definitely like a huge inflection point for me in my life. And then the other cool thing too is like tying it back to like the mission statement of what we were doing. We were kind of doing like this survivability analysis for the Navy, and it was really awesome because we ended up making like 30 recommendations back to Congress about like, here's how you can make this ship more survivable in the missions that you think it's going to encounter. And that was also like super impactful for me to be like, yo, we put in all these hard work and all this time and all this energy to get this company off the ground. And on the flip side, if that ship ever sees combat, there's a decent chance that we just saved people's lives because of the analysis we were able to do and the decisions we were like helping people to make. And like, again, I was in high school. A lot of these guys were like fresh out of college. Like, it's not like we have a background or any right to be doing that. We just had a lot of smart people in a room. We got our hands on a problem that mattered, and we made a difference. And I think that's like the really core part of Beast Code now is just find people of all walks of life and be like, you can make a difference. You can make an impact. Come join our team and let's change the world for the better at some point. And it's just giving people those huge impactful opportunities where you could go to Facebook and make more money. But at the end of the day, what is your impact that you actually had there?
Yeah.
That's super motivating for me.
Such like an iterative thing too. Like talking about that first project we had where it was this like analysis thing, that's like super niche. So from like a business perspective, if we stuck with that, we would not be here today. But we were able to bloom that into like a training application. So we had this 3D model that we were doing survivability testing on. And so the Navy was able to use that same 3D model to train people on. Think of like video game training. Like now I can actually walk around the ship and I can operate and do procedures like I would in real life. And then like that turned into like the sustainment thing of like I have all this data behind this 3D model and people that are doing like their day-to-day jobs, like looking for a part number to order something, like that takes multiple systems today to go through. And in ours, it was like a search bar, click on it and, oh, there's my part number. Now I can go do my job. And I've saved a bunch of time, but we never had like a master plan of like, hey, we'll be able to do maintenance with it or training or analysis or any of these other use cases that we're thinking about today. It just came from just like, in this case, hanging out with the warfighter and figuring out like, what is your job? And like, how can we make things easier? And at the end of it, we ended up with this like platform where we can bring in 3D models and different types of data and do it like really easy and like make like loading in those types of things like really quick because a lot of the enterprise systems out there are a little bit slower. And now like think about like the impact piece of it, making it SaaS so that like any organization can pick that up and start applying it to like their workforce. Like it's just scaled beyond anything that we've ever thought of.
Yeah, where you're nailing down certain problems for one area and you're like, wow, this applies for, I mean, you could have a manufacturer that has complicated parts and load in and be able to see it and everything. You said it, everywhere from maintenance to sales and to instructions and teaching. Is that how y'all, I mean, that's kind of your bread and butter, right? Is 3D modeling certain things for in mapping it, giving descriptions, being able to easily come in and out?
Part of it, and that's probably like the usual kind of use case where it's an organization that has a 3D representation or wants a 3D model of their facility or whatever it is that they're building. And we can make all that data super lightweight so they can actually operationalize that and access all the data points that they need. But then we work with some guys like the Space Force, and they don't really care about 3D models. They've taken our platform and pulled out the 3D viewer and put in like a Google Maps view of Cape Canaveral where they do the launches. And they want to see where are the different launch sites and the facilities. And we do a lot of cool things where you can map out like where electricity is flowing or like cooling and things like that. And so they'll reuse that piece, but they're looking at it from like a much larger scale of like this part of the state or the city. Like here's how the electricity flows between these facilities. And if I was to lose like this power center over here, like how would that affect my launches today and all the other things that are going on?
Even environmental data like turtle migration.
Yeah. Yeah, they care about like endangered species, and so they actually have to track like all the, turtles and other types of things that are going on, and like they can use our platform to aggregate that data and see where are the turtles. Also, like what's the status of power for this area or this region, and then like what are all the other events that are going on in Cape Canaveral.
That's pretty cool.
I think to kind of directly answer your question, the bread and butter that we have is, as you just said, it's that data aggregation piece. Like we've had customers that even come to us and they're like, we don't want a 3D model because it's just not the use case that we have. But I've got technical documents over there, and I have this supply system that tells me what parts I have on board, and I have my training over there, and people have 12 different logins to 8 different computer systems. How can we just get it in one place that it's really easy to go from one to the other? And that's the piece that we fill. And it's really cool because we're not even looking to replace those systems. We literally just bring them together as like a single point of entry almost. So you can like pull up a tech doc that you're looking at, be like, oh yeah, that's the part that I need. Click, open in supply system, and then it just takes you to the supply system over there. And you don't have to know that, oh, well, in the tech doc, it's, the forward cooling valve, but in the supply system, it's actually CWTAC VTAC 13. Like, we know that on the back end. And you don't have to have that translation. And it's funny because we've been to places before where they literally have like a binder to interface with a digital system, which is just like mind boggling to me to be like, hey, if you want to go from this digital system that is a document to that digital system that's your supply chain, you have to go grab this 3-ring binder out of Joe's desk and flip to page 420 to figure out like what is this valve in the other system's name so that you can even go see if it's there. And like we could just cut all that out, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the use case for that commercially is huge. I'm sure you've thought about that a lot. As a founder, what was it like coming from being an employee and right out of college, I think, right? Or right in college?
Yeah, right out of college. Yeah.
And being an employee and going, you know what, all right, I'm going to take these 7 guys and be the CEO. I'm going to be I should say all you guys were founders, but like it's going to be primarily at the end of the day on my shoulders to make sure this thing goes forward, and the decisions we make, I'm going to be the breaker of it, even though I'll probably default to John on stuff. And like, what was that like?
Yeah, I would say like like originally that probably didn't even resonate with me of like, oh, I'm going to be the CEO and this falls on my shoulders. It was like, oh, this is just my job and I'm going to come in and do stuff. And like every day you kind of figure like, oh, I'm supposed to do that as well. Okay, cool. Let's learn about that really quick and figure it out. And the next day you're like, wait, we were supposed to like submit that form for our business to keep things going, and we need that license, and what's an insurance? We need insurance now? Okay, let's work through all that. And it's just, I would say it never resonated with me. Even probably like today, like I know I'm the CEO and like everyone's relying on you, right, to succeed, but I guess I don't think of it that way. I think like we just come in and we do really great things and we continue iterating and doing better, and like good things are just going to keep happening.
Yeah. There are a lot of things that come up that no one else knows about, like, oh, quarterly taxes, or we got to pay state and federal and this and that. It just,
How do you pay SaaS tax?
I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Let's Google it.
Yeah, especially with SaaS, you'll hit that when the legislation hasn't caught up to where tech is, but
Yeah, I think we talked about that last time where it's like, hey, if you make a sale online in a SaaS platform and you're talking to different people about where is that tax? Is that taxed on my headquarters? They're like, no, it's taxed on like data residency.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, cool, but I don't know where the data residency is, like which state in America, because I don't handle that. There's 9 different data centers and they all have the data and none of them have the data. So which one is it? Like,
You're like,
yeah.
our nexus is at US East B. Yeah. So when you guys went from that small little 7 guys and you got your first office, what was like kind of the next milestone that you remember?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, there are like several milestones in Beast Code. I think we didn't really start scaling until like 2018-ish, and that's when we started going from doing those analysis type use cases into building the training application. That's when the Navy took a really big step with us, and that was a contract that was like 3 or 4 times bigger than what we were dealing with. And I remember coming out of that meeting with the Navy and being like, okay, wow, first off, this is freaking awesome. This is going to go places. And then also thinking, I guess back to that CEO piece, like, okay, now we need to hire a lot of people. We got to like really think through how we're going to deliver on all these types of things. We had, up until that point, we were hiring like onesie twosies kind of people. And I remember the first, we call it Beast Code Academy, where you bring people on and onboard them for a couple days and get them all their IT stuff and teach them about Beast Code and show them the products. Like, I think it was 8 or 9 people we brought on. And so going from like 1 or 2 people randomly to like, cool, now I've got this, we just hired 9 people today and they're all starting. It was just like it was a big moment for us. And now we have these academies where we do get 5 to 10 people every now and again. And that's just like a normal kind of thing.
Yeah. Did that shift from almost infancy to adolescence, the shift for a company, was that, now is that normal? You're like, oh, okay, sweet.
Everything's always changing now. So like you get so many good things every day and like so many bad things that happen where you're just like unfazed by them. Right? You're like, cool, that was a great thing that happened. That's awesome. We should celebrate that. And then something bad happens, you're like, ooh, well, that's not great. Somebody leaves or something that was in whatever role and you're like, I'm not happy about that, but we'll get through it. We're big enough and we got enough people that we'll figure out the solution.
Yeah. I mean, you got Devlin, so who else do you need?
I think that's more in the bad category. Like I wake up every morning, I'm like, fuck, we still got Devlin.
I agree with John.
I think it depends on the day.
Working for having contracts with DoD, good side, bad side.
The good side is they are usually fairly large contracts that you're getting. So they never want to give you like 10 grand. It's always like, this is a $500,000 contract or a multi-million-dollar contract. The bad side is like, it could take 2 years to get that contract and there's not any like type of timeline that goes with it. So there are contracts where we literally have waited, I just said years, and you get statuses every day of like, yeah, it might be tomorrow. And then it's not tomorrow, and you just wait. There is no like time frame for when those things are going to happen. It's a bit random. It's a bit volatile.
Once you get some, though, is it easier to get more? I mean, like after the first several, it's like, okay, we've contracted with them before. They're a certified contractor.
It's the credibility piece. I think like once they understand that you are a small business, but you've figured out how to work within the DoD, it does make it easier, but it doesn't get any less volatile. We even have our own, they call them prime contracts, when they give you your own contract vehicle, and ours is $500 million ceiling, so they can put up to $500 million on it in total, different tasks. But still, that can take multiple months to do, and a lot of times that's still not the preferred way that they want to contract you. They may go some different route.
Yeah.
So it's still tough, but like I think the good part of like where we are today is we have so many different contracts with the government. So when we were 2016, like John had mentioned, and you have one contract and it runs out in a month and you don't know when the next one's coming, that's just like a really tough time. But when you have 70 different contracts, you have revenue coming from different places, and you're now like absorbed into that business model.
I think one of the things too that I didn't realize until I got into this space that's definitely like a downside as well is a lot of the contracting process is tied to like political events. And so like one of the big things that we talk about whenever we do company strategy meetings is like what are the upcoming political events that we should be talking about and worried about, and like, you know, government continuing resolutions. Everyone is like, oh, you know, I can't believe the government can't pass a budget, and then you like go to Starbucks and have your morning, and it's like it's real for us because when they can't pass a budget, we don't get contracts. And oftentimes, like, people get upset when it's, you know, the whole government shutdown phase, but that's the most extreme. Like, the government always has continuing resolutions in a lot of sectors across the board. And so a lot of times, you know, we'll be like, oh, well, the government isn't shut down right now, but they have this continuing resolution in this sector. So we have a contract out that's actually been, like, selected, but it's been selected, not funded, because that program office literally has not received their funds for 2024, and it's currently May. Like, we're almost halfway through the year and they don't have any money to give us because the government is still in continuing resolution because some politician over there can't do their job and pass a budget because they're trying to splice so many things into this one bill that they're all debating it. And it's like, could you guys just release the money, please? Like, if you're going to be petty, go be petty in your quarter over there. We're trying to run a business. We're trying to give people jobs. We're trying to, you know, have an impact on the warfighter.
Yeah.
And that was something that just like never clicked to me until you start running a business. And you're like, oh, now it does impact me. Now this is a real problem.
Yeah.
On the flip side to the volatility piece of it, you may have a continuing resolution where whatever budget doesn't get passed until like the next summer. But in that summer time frame, now they've been allocated so much money, they're trying to find ways to spend it. And so they'll come to you and be like, hey, I have X number of dollars, and if you have a contract vehicle, I can award it to you like right now. But it goes back to that volatility piece. You know, you might have summers where that never happens. You may have summers where it spikes, and you kind of have to balance that too, because you don't want to take on so much work that you have to hire so many people that come next year when they don't sign the budget again, you're like, what am I going to do with all these people? Got to go find them work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the piece I think, well, few people probably understand is from your seat of the responsibility piece on people, you know, because it's not just right people, right seats, and it's also the money coming in so that you can pay them their salaries, give them raises when they need to, give them a path that they can succeed in. Has that been something that you're like continually learning?
Oh yeah, and like I think the big thing for us is kind of like why we wanted to create Beast Code was like we don't want people worried about finances or thinking about the contracts. We want the majority of the workforce just focused on writing code or building models or building courses for the whatever customer, and just doing a great job with that. You know, once you start bringing in that like this is a contract and it has X number of dollars and this is like the profit margins on it, then their brains are off on something completely different. They're not thinking about like the tech side of things. So like we feel that being responsible is like us shielding that, like program managers and directors and above thinking about those types of things so the rest of the workforce can just do their thing.
Yeah. And what's rare is that you got a mixture. It's pretty crazy. I wish Eddie was here because, it's almost like a mixture between us two. Me on tech entrepreneur side, him on being a Navy SEAL for 20 years. You know?
Yeah.
And so between the two of us, I do think what's interesting is you have a culture that is very much anti, like, government static. Yeah, you're trying to create a Silicon Valley type. Hey, let's get together. Let's do things in the smartest way. Let's innovative, I would say. And you're doing it with government contracts. So
Yeah.
there's probably few. I wonder how few of companies are like that actually that have that type of culture in government contracts.
I'd say we're like in a bubble. There are definitely other companies that are like Beast Code that are out there that are doing similar types of things, but like in different types of domains. So there are like those kind of, I'm biased, but like cool companies that are keeping that like Silicon Valley tech kind of culture, but adopting and figuring out the government contracting model. And I think at the same time, the government's trying to figure that out as well. Like they've obviously bought software for decades now, but to think of something like SaaS or subscriptions or how do they accept updates every day to software. Like one of the hard things that we deal with is to be able to get our software on some of these different platforms. Maybe you only have 1 or 2 chances a year to be able to give them a software update. So if something went wrong, and like normally like Netflix will just patch it, and then you log in the next time and it's fixed. And you can't do that with the DoD. Like, cool, you can send that next patch 6 months from now. So trying to like balance that whole, like, I have a SaaS platform that I could push 100 updates to today, but I have a customer that doesn't want that. They kind of want that, and they're trying to figure out that piece, but like they're limited on being able to adopt it themselves.
How come? How come they can't just accept updates in it? I mean, is it security? Is it them having to, I mean, like a Git master that they have to go through before they accept that commit?
Well, so a lot of it is actually like, a lot of it is security, right? The accreditation process to get software accredited varies wildly based on our customer. And I'll advocate that it should. A lot of people don't like the process, and there is no the process. It's like a different process for every customer. And that part, I think, is fine. A lot of the individual customers are, they lack the expertise to like properly evaluate it, and saying you end up with someone who's like asking for mission security, safety critical ratings, and you're like, dude, this is like a dashboard. Like, this is a dashboard for your R&D lab over there. You're not running anything that critical on this, and the problem is he doesn't know any better, so he's just gonna crank everything up to 10 in order to call it good because his career's on the line. But I think a lot of it too is just bandwidth, right? Like, a lot of these systems are disconnected from the internet and they operate just in a silo somewhere. And so the problem is, in order for them to get an update, someone eventually has to come pull the latest version off the internet, virus scan it, run it through their process, load it onto the server, and deploy it. And we make that as easy as possible. But at the end of the day, he might have 100 other applications he's also doing that for, and he's playing IT support for tens of thousands of people, and that person's just spread really, really, really thin. And on the flip side, like Z said, they're trying to figure it out. And a lot of people are realizing like, oh, hey, I'm DoD. This is an important mission, but it's not quite that important. And they are figuring out ways to get things into the cloud and find that appropriate balance of security, so that they can have the integrity that they need and the security that they need, while acknowledging that like sometimes getting updates every day is actually a security benefit, because now you're always patched against the latest stuff. And we actually have some customers who are taking that posture now too. So a lot of it varies. Like, the Navy, everyone says, is really far behind, but at the end of the day, I think they should be, because most of their platforms float in the middle of the ocean with no internet connection. Yeah. So their primary goal is not how do I get a security patch every day, it's how do I make sure this thing isn't going to crash, because this is my last opportunity for 6 months to get an update. And if this is a bad update, like if they got the CrowdStrike update from 2 weeks ago before they went out, that's going to be a real bad 6 months. Yeah. Whereas, you go to like some of the more Air Force, Space Force style programs, they're like, no, this is on a land-based infrastructure project. We have, tons of internet connectivity. And because we have internet connectivity, part of their threat model is we do need like patches every day or every week. As soon as you find stuff, you're constantly staying on top of it. And I think that is the appropriate model for those two situations. They're just such a different use case. And that's where it gets fun, is our software is applicable to both, but like wildly different environments.
And you can see like the adoption piece of it, because when we started in like 2014, 2015, we always talked about like, we should get this in the cloud and anyone can access it from anywhere. And they'd go, ooh, clouds. No, that's a security vulnerability. Can't do that. Same thing with like 3D models, that use case. And they're like, no, we use paper for things. 3D models, those are video games.
Absolutely can't buy a gaming PC for that.
Nope, no way. But now our biggest Navy customer, they have the product in the cloud. And our Space Force customer, they also have it in the cloud. And so like we can push pretty real-time updates to it. I mean, even if it's like a once a day kind of thing, that is, light years better than every 6 months.
Yeah, that makes sense. Honestly, I mean, you don't want your missile launch code server running like serverless, like the new serverless version on AWS. You don't want, you want some things disconnected, honestly. And you do want to have processes but then there's other stuff, like you said. Do y'all see that getting better with the government? Is them going, you know what, this, our dashboard for this, I mean, this isn't any way connected to anything that we should host this in the cloud and make this easier and get continual updates.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things too is there's starting to be a lot of like government cloud enclaves being stood up where it's like a cloud environment that isn't connected to the internet. So it's still local somewhere. But the big thing is that it usually runs like some version of AWS or at least Kubernetes or some cloud infrastructure. What that basically means is that you're taking your software and you're not just saying, here's my software, install it, good luck. Like the software can tell the computer how to install itself. So then the IT administrators are more hands-off, right? I can just give them a build and say, hey, run this, and it'll update itself. And they're able to run it and update itself. And either it works and it's great, or it doesn't work and they give us logs back and we work with them. And the cool thing there is it's like the same cloud environment as what you typically see on the commercial SaaS side. So then it kind of starts bringing those use cases closer together where it's like, hey, even if you're bringing your own hardware and your own system administrators, it's still the same architecture, the same type of thing. And at some point you can almost choose whether or not you want just the cloud version because you want to be relatively hands-off, or if you want to host it yourself because you want all the benefits that come with that. I think the hard part from an engineering perspective has been like engineers oftentimes get with the end user and they're like, this is the problem I need to solve. I need to give this guy 3D models that talk to that system. And then you start talking about like, cool, but keep in mind you're going to deploy into that server rack and this IT administrator is the only guy who can have access to it. So now like part of your problem statement is, well, how do we manage updates? Like, are we going to once a quarter or twice a year, like really do a waterfall style release and then go back to being agile the rest of the year? Like, how do we do that? And they don't like those conversations because they're like, no, I'm a software engineer. I build a website that makes that 3D model talk to that system. And you're like, well, that's not the whole problem though. Like the problem encompasses more than just the end user. Your problem is the environment that you're operating in. The problem is even like culturally, the DoD has a lot of cultural problems where we can come in and be like, hey, this tool solves your problem. And people are like, yeah, but I'm used to pen and paper. Like I'm used to this other way of doing it. And
Yeah, that's a big one.
Where's the print button?
No, exactly. Like we'll give them processes and they're like, oh, I love this is a digital process that's so much more intelligent. Where's the print button? You're like, why did we do this?
Export to Excel.
Right.
The same thing.
Well,
Download a CSV.
You're dealing with cultural stuff, and sometimes it's not even a functionality deal. It is literally just a different UI, and it's like I'm not used to this. For 20 years, I've done it this way, even though I understand that this will no longer work or it's super inefficient.
Right.
But now this different UI, I don't understand. And so you're having to walk almost like handhold someone or a group of admins or something like that through a different UI.
Yeah, I've had a number of conversations with product owners and like program managers at Beast Code around, like I lovingly refer to it as our breach and clear tactics of like, how do we get this software to be culturally adopted and not just like, because you can build the right tool. You can build the tool that they need. But if they don't want it and they don't feel like they need it, then it's not the right tool because you're not going to get that cultural adoption. So like sometimes people get so focused in on like, if we build this tool, this is a really easy tool and we can build it and it will solve their problem. And you follow up with cool. But like, are they going to actually use it? And then you start talking to the end users and they're like, we don't want that tool. And there's like one reason or another that they don't want the tool. It could be, again, like you nailed it on the head. Hey, I have this thing that already does that and I'm used to this UI. Please don't replace it. And you're like, but I can do it better. And they're like, I don't care. I don't want to change. And
yeah, you're going to get that even more so once you'll hit commercial B2B. Yeah. It's going to be worse because in a government contract, it's like, hey, it's contracted. They have to. Probably in a lot of situations. Well, when in commercial, like the lady that, is been working there for 20 years, that she may say, heck no, we're not going to convert to this. And the owner or whoever, business decision makers, they'll have a lot more pull towards them.
Well, and the hard part with that too, though, is like on one hand, the government does have that forcing function, but that's also a double-edged sword because at the end of the day, that's our reputation on the line. If they hate it and we're forced to deploy it to them anyway and they continue to hate it, that's like makes it 10 times worse than if they just didn't adopt it and had a neutral like stance with us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, even when we had Repbox and, we had the old UI and then we changed it we made it mobile responsive and, something Metronic and, the old interface was very, almost, not very, but like kind of Windows 98-ish, just old school.
More squarish.
Yeah. Crazy box shadows, things like that. Rolled that out, and even some people were like, I have a button that goes to the old interface still. And it was like, but this is clean. This is perfect. This is so much easier. You have like peaks and all of these things and stuff. And it's just, some of it's just
thousands of bug fixes.
yeah.
The old one literally doesn't work.
Like, that's even like, you know, a somewhat modern software to like a more modern software. And it's funny, since coming to Beast Code, you know, at the same time, people using Access and Excel and things like that, like they're just so used to those things still that, yeah, I think part of what we're seeing is working with people while developing the software helps them get comfortable, and then they forget that it's even something new. And that's what's making rolling out some of the software that we're doing right now just a little bit like easier, because now they become the champions of that thing, and they're not so much like, oh, these Beast Code people. They're just now using it, and now the people that work with them are like, when do I get to, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it is like finding what's the problem you can solve that hasn't been solved. Like, don't start with an improvement. If you start with, I'm going to replace this system and make it better, you're now fighting a cultural battle. But if you start with, here's a gap no one's doing, I'll do this, that's a pretty easy adoption, and that gets your foot in the door. And then once you have your foot in the door, you can point at the other system and be like, hey, well, wouldn't it be nicer if this system worked this way? And people are like, yeah, it kind of would be. And then that starts that process going.
You ever have the experience where you talk to the wrong person and like start going down the road with the wrong people, and then later on down the line, you know, you figure out a whole other set of stuff that they're like, that stuff don't matter. And you're like, okay, well, it'd been great to know like 6 months ago before we built out all this stuff. And
Yeah. Yeah, it's finding the right people in the organization to make the right thing. And kind of not the same thing, but a parallel to what Wargo was talking about. We have like this friendly neighborhood Spider-Man strategy where like we don't want to compete with people. Like if you looked at our product, there's a whole field that's called product lifecycle management, and they have 3D models and data that's organized in a hierarchy, and it's tagged to like tech documents, and you're like, oh, that's very similar to what Beast Code does. And we're like, no, it's not at all. Like that is awesome for authoring data and configuration management of it, and we're really great at accessing that data and making it super lightweight. And you bring those two things together, and they're like freaking unstoppable. So there's a lot of like educating people on like, no, we're not competing with that. And to Wargo's point, like we're not looking for use cases of like, we're going to go replace that industry. It's no, we're going to build something that complements all these other applications out there so that users of it will then come adopt what we're doing.
yeah, for sure. Eric, I'll shift a little bit. How have you had any chance to do any leadership training around like new CEOs or guys that are going, hey, I've, you know, even friends and family that are going, I hate what I'm doing, I hate where I'm working, I want to start my own thing, or here's my passion, and spent any time kind of helping guys think through that, or to just take that leap like you did?
Not too much. We're workaholics, so we're like always working on like Beast Code stuff. But I mean, we totally would help. I mean, anyone that's asking about that, it's kind of like, just do it. Like Wargo showed me this article a while ago, and it was like everything's a draft, and it was really all about just like iterating on stuff. And it's like, you know what, just go for it. Like if that's what you want to do, and you think you can make an impact doing that, then take a shot at it. Go build something and deploy it, and just see what happens.
What I hear a lot from guys that will say, I want to do this, or I'm miserable where I'm at, I'm going to try, I'd love to do this, but, and there's always this, I can't do it. I can't, you know. And sometimes, in some of them, you're like, okay, I kind of, you know, I got a wife and 2 kids, and I can't. It's like, well, if someone gave you X amount of money to have a runway to go do it, would you do it? You know, there's some people I think that are just like, I can't. But then there's some people that will go, okay, I got to figure out how.
I was going to say, this is kind of is going to come off cold, but I actually think it's a great filter. Because if you're the type of person who looks at a really, really big problem that has a lot of uncertainty, and you see the problems in that, and you have that anxiety of, I can't do this, you're probably going to fail anyway. So it's probably a good filter that you don't try. Because one of the core values that we have is like, how do you get to yes? And how do you be flexible? And so it's not just like, oh, having this goal of I want to go over there. It's more like, well, I want to do something in that direction. And I'm flexible enough that when problems come up, I'm willing to change. I'm willing to end up somewhere totally different than where I'm starting from. And if you can do that and you can find like, well, what's the 1% thing that makes sense today? I will have this big vision, but what's the one piece I can pull out and do now? Where can I get money? How can I like change my vision and be flexible and kind of negotiate with the environment that I'm in? Like that is a critical skill that you have to succeed. So if you can't get over that problem in the first place, you're just going to keep coming up against that problem over and over and over again. And it's been a fun, like, personal growth journey. Like my background is in like engineering. I write a whole lot of math proofs. And one of the biggest challenges that I have is like, I like math proofs because that's like one of the few things that I know. But at the end of the day, the world is just messy. And how do you take that leap of faith knowing that you can be flexible enough to navigate whatever comes up and end up in a totally different place than where you started, but still call it success?
Yeah, I think about like 2014, like it is so easy to get to know. Like you can look at a problem and there's like 100 reasons not to go for that. But like that, yes, maybe like minuscule, but if you got to that and you achieved it, like, wouldn't that be freaking awesome? And you're like, yeah, it would be. So like, let's jump and do it. But like 2014, me would be like super anxious and be like, oh, I don't know about that. You know, every day there's like, you know, bad things and they kind of cascade on each other. And today, after going through so many of those different scenarios, you're like, it's not a big deal. We can get to yes. We can figure that out.
And it's funny because the yes we've gotten to today is very much not the yes that we wanted to get to in 2014. Like 2014, us said, I think there's a yes over there. And then you get like halfway there and you look left and you go, oh, there's a bigger yes over there. And you pivot and you go that way. And then you pivot again and you pivot again. And I remember it was like the first 3 or 4 years of the company, we used to have a meeting in like February-ish. And we're like, what do we think the big opportunities are this year that we like have to go after? And we'd have that and try to call like 8-ball corner pocket. And then November would come and we'd review the year and be like, well, that was a cool thing, but like this thing popped up in the middle of the year and it was way better. And then like the next year we're like, yeah, we're going to double down on that thing. That's going to be the big thing this year. And then you get to the end of the year and was like, well, that was a big thing, but holy shit, this other elephant just came up behind us. We didn't even see it coming, but that was huge. Like just being able to pivot, being able to get to yes.
On your wall, it says think big, start small, scale fast. And it's really like those first 2 words, the think big piece of it. Like anytime that we've been like conservative about something of like, ooh, I don't know if we should scale up, or why don't we like, you know, maybe not hire as many people this month, or, you know, something like that. Always like the next month, it's like, damn, I wish we'd been hiring more people because we now have this giant opportunity that like now we're going to be catching up on. And so I think for us, like it's always thinking big. And it sounds like super cliche, but it's like, no, just keep like going for excellence and just keep trying.
I think the article you mentioned is the Cult of Manifesto of Done.
Cult of Done Manifesto.
Cult of Done Manifesto. And it's like, it's got a bunch of stuff in it. And one was that he said is everything is draft. Done is the engine of more.
Got this one in my Obsidian vault. Hold on.
Okay, yeah. But just for me, you know, working with you, working with Z, working with Wargo, a lot of what you used to say kind of came up as like, we'll test it. You know, it was never like, nah, or I know what's going to happen. It was, let's test it. We'll test it. We'll see what happens. Yeah. We'll try it. And if we mess up, because we will, then we'll do something different. And then we would test it and we'd mess up and
we'd go, man, we did better than we thought we would.
yeah.
We actually do this.
I didn't think we'd get that far.
If we do it this way this time, then maybe we'll get there. But we'll also just find things along the way. Like y'all were saying, you know, if you don't step into it, then, you know, you get kind of like an issue for me is I would get handcuffed in fear. Like if it's not going where I think it should go, then I just get stuck rather than just continuing and done as the engine of more. Get done with that one thing, right? And then move on to the next thing. Everything is a draft. It's not going to be perfect, and nothing has ever ended up ultimately the way that I expected it to. And so, yeah, I think that article there is probably, I mean, I feel like it's become kind of the core of how we've been operating for a while and really helpful to just encourage people on teams to even push forward with stuff.
Yeah, one of my favorite things from that, you hit on like 2 or 3 of them there, which I thought was perfect. They have, remember that the point of being done is not to be finished, but to get other things done. Like nothing is ever going to be finished. You're never going to do it and it's finally done and you're like, well, that's it. Because that's the day that you stagnate. That's the day you didn't dream big enough. So like half the time the goal of getting what's in front of you done is just so that you can start on that thing over there and so that you can learn something from it. Never underestimate the value of the knowledge that you gained.
And like that whole everything's a draft, like it's better to like make a decision. And again, this is all like super cliche kind of stuff, but like make a decision and like see what happens. And like, if it didn't go right, you can just roll it back, but at least you tried something and you now know like, oh, that was not the best route to go, but I learned something from it and we can iterate from there.
One more thing, we're talking about the whole SaaS rollout stuff and all of this and trying to think like, oh, how is it going to be perfect? How is it going to be the best thing? And, heard in I think probably like a Y Combinator podcast back in the day, it was like, how many of you remember Airbnb's awesome release day or like Google's, like no one gives a shit about your shitty launch, like it's like, just get it. Just get it out there. Get
It's the
people
world of
using
soft
it.
launches now.
Yeah. Yeah. Find out, is it solving a problem? If so, great. Make it even better. If not, where is the problem and solve it?
It's a good word. And I do think that there's nothing that we've gone after. I think the amount of time that you spend trying to figure out and what seems like wisdom sometimes is fear. That you're thinking through, like I should have left my company for Ratbox probably a year prior that I did, but I was being wise, and working on that both at the same time. When I knew, hey, this is what I was built for, so to speak, but the time that you spend thinking through, trying to attack something 100%, not saying that you don't have strategy, but do strategy and then act on it as soon as you figure out your strategy. Like there shouldn't be any time of exploring it so much more because you'll be wasting all that time that you could get to testing and figuring out, oh, okay, there's things that we didn't know, we didn't think of because there always is.
I think it was the Oppenheimer movie that came out a year or two ago that was like theory alone will only get you so far. And it's the same thing, right? Like at some point, you can reason about something all day long, but as soon as you do it, you're going to realize there are 20,000 things you didn't think about that the world is just messier with. We had an org restructure last year, and the middle leadership that was looking at changing and reorganizing themselves, like kept pitching ideas. What if we move this person over here? What if we defined this position like this? And it was like 4 or 5 weeks they were just thinking about it. About week number 2, I was like, guys, just pick something. At some point, it doesn't matter what you do as long as you do anything. And then they got to like the 4-week mark, and I was like, and they're like, well, what about this problem? I was like, guys, if you did something 4 weeks ago, you would know what the problem is today. You wouldn't still be arguing about what the problem is, and at least that would be better.
100%. 100%. And you figure that's how you figure things out along the way. I'm the biggest fan of getting to testing as soon as possible. Yes, have a quick strategy. Okay, what are we testing?
Yeah.
What do we think is going to be the issues? How are we going to test it? But usually that, honestly, I've never, a couple hours, and you can pretty much figure that out. And then come up with a plan and just start executing. And then you'll figure out things that, has there ever been a project or anything that you've been on that you're like, wow, we didn't think about that one, and that ended up being, a huge issue that we would have never figured out unless we tested?
Yeah, it happens all the time. In both ways of like, oh, wow, we really didn't think about that whole piece, and that's going to be so much more work to kind of work through. And other things of like, oh, wow, that was a really great opportunity. We actually didn't think that was going to be as big as it was.
And sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's, wow, I didn't realize that problem was as big as it was. No one else has solved it. If we solve it, that's our differentiator. And it can be both at the same time, which is powerful.
You just said something, I don't remember what, but it just made me think of with testing, just setting the expectation even with the customer or the user too. Like it gives them some ownership that when you're going through it, either you're tricking them or you're bringing them along for the ride, one of the two, but either way, they're part of figuring out the solution with you, right? If you're testing something and you make a solution and you try it, it's kind of like Wargo. I think the last time you were here, when y'all started, it was, hey, does this work? And Jimmy would be like, yeah, kind of, sort of, that's bad, maybe different. Cool, see you in a week, and come back. And it's like, how about this? Like, better, you're moving in the right direction, maybe if it did this. And cool, see you in a week, and coming back. And I think that there's huge value in not trying to present like you have the answers and this is going to solve all your problems, but really working with the people along the way.
Thinking about like those iterations, like to your question, we built this product called Beast Cloud, and we probably spent like a year building this thing. It was a learning management system, so you could go in and add students and assign them the courses and track their progress, and it was like its own application within itself, and it was just complicated. There's a lot of use cases. One of the first like kind of like web deployed applications that we built, so it was like different tech stack and technologies and all that. There's entire apps that just do that. So we were kind of building this thing that competes with like billion-dollar companies. So we were never going to win that fight. And so that got us to the point of like, hey, don't compete with people. Like figure out what's out there and like build an application that integrates with others. So yeah, we wasted a bunch of time and money building that thing, but we learned so much from it. And so much of our strategy like today is like based on lessons from things that we did in the past, like that.
Yeah, for sure. Even your failures, you learn so much in them. I mean, if you hadn't built that, you wouldn't had gotten all that experience of learning how to build a cloud application, probably.
Yeah.
Like all the background behind that.
And I think one of the big things, too, is trying to be methodical about what you try so that whether or not you succeed or fail, it's a win. Because there are failures that you don't learn anything from, and those are the actual failures. And so that's usually like what I tell my devs is none of us have future sight. None of us know what the right answer is. My personal philosophy is that there is no such thing as a right answer because the world is just so messy that there are just so many complications on that. But at the end of the day, as long as you can look at something and be like, if this succeeds, we move in the right direction, and if this fails, I will have learned X. It's a win-win at that point, and that's as far as you need to take a solution. As soon as you get to a win-win, send it. Don't wait any longer. That comes back to your just take action thing.
Yeah, love it. All right, last couple questions. One, difference between working on the business and in the business. Thoughts behind that, experience behind that too.
Working on versus in. It's very artistic.
Autistic.
Artistic. Yeah, I guess in is more of like kind of your day to day. Like I'm a part of it and I'm doing types of things, and like so much of like Wargo and I's job now is maybe abstracting ourselves more and like working on the business. Like where should we be going? What things should we be focusing on? How should we be organized? And like so much of like what we're doing today is like finding the right people like Devlin to help us with those types of things, getting the right people in the right seats with the right size workforce, all working on the right stuff.
Insert joke. Yeah. It's tough because you get sucked into the in and work with guys and teams. Your place though now, it's like a lot of your time really needs to be probably working on and like you said, abstracting yourself, thinking through where we're going.
And a lot of like Wargo and I is like the accountability piece of like pulling ourselves out of it, because Wargo is awesome with all things like technology. Like he could just write a lot of those products, and like there's little things that we do where it's like, yeah, we'll just do that really quick. But then like you're robbing that experience from somebody else that could step up and do those types of things, and then be that person that like they've now leveled up and they can do new things, and you can rely on them to do that stuff.
Yeah, Power Vacuum can be a really powerful tool if you use it right.
Okay, last question. When are you going to IPO?
Oh, man.
Have you considered it?
No, we're not even thinking about that right now. We're so focused on scaling up and getting the SaaS thing rolling that, yeah, we don't even really think too much about that.
I was going to say, I think we're also just having like way too much fun. We were talking, or Z was talking a couple of months ago with a guy who works at a company that's adjacent to us, and they were talking about doing like a conditional merger with 2 other companies because they wrote software and they were looking for a DevOps company that they could basically conditionally merge with and sell them as a joint package. And he was like, yeah, we've been doing this for 5 years, so I think it's just time to cash out and this will be great. Like, what are you guys going to sell? And we're like, what do you mean, what are we going to sell? This is way too much fun to sell. Like, yeah, you could cash out and you could go live that lifestyle and buy a small island or have a boat or go live it up, but you can't buy global domination. Like,
Yeah.
you can't buy the life experiences that we get by running this company and really trying to push it to the max. And you don't buy the fulfillment that you get when you see a group of like totally misfit people who actually made an impact on national security. Like, you can't buy those things. And so much of it is just like, don't want to get out of the game. And I also think it's a huge strength that we don't have a board. We've got a couple of people who have to deal with selling an idea to a board and pitching it to shareholders, and that just sounds awful. Like, if we could not do that, that would be great.
A lot of paperwork with IPOs that you'd have to do. Yeah, and I mean, we do a lot of like sales demos type stuff, and there's a lot of big companies that are like, we can give you global sales tomorrow, and they're like, it's not the same. Like, we're so close to being that company that has like a product that's used around the world, and like, it's just like one more push to get to that point, and we can be like, yeah, we did that. We were 7 dudes hanging out around a fold-out table, bring your own chair, and like we got that all the way to like total global sales and making an impact around the world.
And a lot of it too, and this isn't a great analogy for a position that a lot of people are in, but for us, it's like, imagine you're going to the gym and you've got a goal that you're working towards, and someone's like, hey dude, if you took this pill, you'd wake up tomorrow and you'd be able to hit your PRs and you'd be able to hit your strength goal and your fat goals and everything else. And you'd be like, well, I mean, it's not actually about the goal. It's about the personal development that I am going to go through in order to meet that goal. And at some point, if we just sold, 49% of the company to a bigger company and they gave us global sales, that's cool, but I didn't learn anything. Z didn't learn anything. And I actually feel like that's where a lot of companies go wrong, because now suddenly you are dealing with global sales and you don't have the structure for it. And at some point, even if the big prime that bought you is like, oh, we're going to leave your company intact, well, that's not going to be possible because you don't have the experience for that new position you're in. You don't have the structure for it. So you're going to have to bring those people in. And then at some point, you just dissolve into the bigger organization. And that would just be the death of Beast Code, because we're not trying to be those big organizations. So,
And the fun part is like just always increasing the goal, right? Because if you talked to us like what the goal was in 2014, it would have been much smaller than like global domination. And so already we're looking at galactic domination, because we're doing a lot of things with space now. So as soon as we get that worldwide, we're like, well, we need people using our product in space now. So like, let's push harder.
yeah, Elon's aiming for Mars, and we're aiming to be on Elon.
Yeah.
We want SpaceX running our stuff when they go to Mars so that we're already there.
First data aggregation platform on Mars.
All right, you heard that, Elon. They're coming up. You'll contact them soon. Start getting in talks with y'all, figuring out. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing, and also just bringing an innovative private company that's helping out national security and DoD stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for the good questions. Like, I hope we were able to provide some insight to some people.
Yeah, anytime you want to hang out, just let us know.
Yeah.
I can hope, Devlin.
Yeah.
More about this pill you mentioned, hitting PRs.
Awesome. Out.